Welcome. My name is Joshua, and as I have said many times before, if we are not witnessing the great apostasy, we are certainly witnessing a great apostasy. And this video is like to stir some people up, primarily because most of the men featured in it have been around long enough to have influenced large portions of the evangelical community, and particularly those who are not predisposed to liberal theology, but rather embrace some form of sound doctrine. And when someone has played a pivotal role in our development as Christians, when the Lord has used someone at a formative time in our walks to help develop us in the faith, we tend to attribute that fruit to the person or the church or the ministry rather than to God himself. And as a result of this misattribution, when corruption emerges and abounds, there is a tendency to trivialize, to overlook, or to outright defend it. And this is a form of idolatry, as if the man or the ministry were good in and of themselves. This happens frequently. It's something I've been trying to highlight for several years now. And what greater way to stumble otherwise sound believers than to usher in deception through the very men that they have come to trust over the years. It's exactly what you would expect from Satan, and it is exactly what is happening. Past good does not justify current error. If we are commanded in Scripture to be testing ourselves to see whether we are of the faith, how much more ought we to be testing all things, even people that we've come to trust? If we're to test ourselves, should we not be testing others around us as well? We are commanded to test the spirits, whether they are of God, but not just once and then it's done. We are to constantly be evaluating what is on the basis of current reality, not what is on the basis of what was. Past good does not justify current error. So you may have heard some encouraging message on evangelism from Ray Comfort in the past. You may have heard some compelling argument from Ken Ham against evolution, or some sermon from John MacArthur, whatever the thing is. None of those things justify what we're going to be looking at today. These things must be evaluated for what they are, not for what you want them to be. You don't have to like me. You don't have to like what's being said. But these things are either true or they aren't. And they are. The video that you see here, this thumbnail, an apostasy report on PureFlix. This was done a couple of years ago, highlighting many of the same figures: Kirk Cameron, Ken Ham, Ray Comfort, and so forth. It may serve as a helpful primer to this video, and there's a lot more backstory concerning their involvement with PureFlix, which is something of the Christian version of Netflix, and the corruption within that entire organization. Some of the things covered in this video appeared in that video as well. So they'll be reintroduced for those that haven't seen them, and also to provide the further context for some of these updates that we're going to be talking about. But it is a helpful video to consider. And so this video is, the previous video that just came out was called The Death of Discernment. This is not directly related to that saga. Coincidentally, it happens to feature several of the same people that were in that, namely Justin Peters, Todd Friel, Phil Johnson. So it is not directly related to that saga, but it is a further testament to the continuing death of discernment from the very men who seem to have cornered the market on the title. I had plans to release this video a few months back. For a few reasons, it was delayed, but I was having some serious issues with my eyes and having problems even reading a computer screen and so forth. So that largely accounted for the delay of this video that we're doing now, which I intended to release several months back. But in any event, here we are. So it's not related to that previous video, but again, I say it is a further testament to how discernment dies. And in that video, in the beginning, we did a brief Bible study in 1 Kings 22 and evaluated what happened in the exchange with Ahab and Micaiah. And as a result of showing partiality to those that spoke well of him, Ahab was ultimately deceived by God himself. God permitted a lying spirit to go into the mouths of his prophets and deceive him, which ultimately led to his demise. There was one Micaiah speaking something contrary to 400 false prophets. Those men spoke encouraging things to Ahab, but they were lies. As Ahab put it, Micaiah only speaks evil of me, and therefore I hate him. That's what he said. So when partiality is present, discernment necessarily dies. It is impossible for discernment to live when partiality is the operational force. And so it is here. The men that we're going to see show partiality in their networks. And the warning for you, whether you like me or not, is precisely what Scripture says, that we are to keep ourselves unspotted from the world, that bad company corrupts good morals. We are exhorted not to lay hands on anyone hastily, nor to share in other people's sins. Concerning Babylon the Great in Revelation, you hear these words, "Come out of her, my people, lest you share in her sins and receive of her plagues." You will be corrupted by these things if you don't heed these warnings. It is imperative, and the word apostasy is not used lightly. Falling away or defecting from the faith is not merely some formal statement. We are told in Scripture of those who deny Jesus by their deeds. In their deeds, they deny him. And this will leaven you. Beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and of Herod. Well, let's start here. Justin Peters. These men are all very close, is the point. All of them are very close, longtime friends. This is a tweet from 2019, September 30th. I spent the day recording at Living Waters with EZ, that is Ray Comfort's son-in-law, I believe. Mark, his son Ethan, super young man, 16 years old, studying Greek, wow, and Ray Comfort. These brothers are the real deal, all of them. So I appreciate Living Waters. They do what they do out of genuine love for Christ. Love these guys. Okay? And there's a picture of Justin with Mark Spence and, of course, with Ray Comfort. Okay. Justin Peters did a conference with Ken Ham, Answers for Women, a women's conference at the Ark Encounter. This is the 2020 conference. He did the same conference the very next year, March of 2021. There's Ken Ham with This time MacArthur wasn't shown in this particular flyer, but you get the point. He's frequents conferences with Ken Ham and is a friend of Ray Comfort. I will point out briefly that this particular conference in 2020 originally had Jackie Hill Perry, the woke social justice warrior, slated to speak with Phil Johnson and Costi Hinn. After a video that I published pointing this out about John MacArthur riding the social justice train, they went into damage control and quietly removed her and then added Justin Peters and some other people. This has happened on several occasions. Despite the reviling and backbiting I get from this group, on numerous occasions I've pointed out these bits of hypocrisy, these contradictions, these errors, and these corruptions that have led to alterations in their entire trajectory, right? So while they will revile and say that I'm just some false witness, it's amazing how many times that they have changed exactly the things that I've pointed out. John MacArthur was going to speak with Rick Warren at the NRB conference a few years back. After I pointed it out, suddenly, a day or two before the conference, he had a mysterious illness and pulled out of the conference. Again, this has happened on a couple of occasions, but nevertheless, the point more so here is Ken Ham and an entire team at Answers in Genesis invited Jackie Hill Perry because she was a popular woman who had some middling Reformed theology. And that was good enough for them. They didn't have the discernment to know or the care, just the general discretion to look into what she actually teaches. And it took someone that they hated to point this out to the world for them to then change it publicly. There is no discernment among these men. It is all business. It is all networking. It is all marketing. Jackie Hill Perry was good enough for them. Phil Johnson's picture was placed right next to hers. So just in passing, there is a pattern of this sort of thing. These people don't know how to police themselves because the enterprise is what ultimately matters. In any event, let's get a brief word from Justin Peters about this conference.
And I'm doing this just to make you aware of a conference at which I will be speaking this coming up October 5th, 6th, and 7th. The conference is entitled Raising Godly Generations, and it will be held at the Ark Encounter. I will be speaking there, so will Conrad Mbewe. I've spent some time with Conrad. He's a great guy. I love the socks off of him. Conrad Mbewe will be speaking there. H.B. Charles will be speaking there. I've met H.B. Charles once, just briefly, but he's a great guy. And Ken Ham will be speaking as well. And so I've got a link down below in the description there, so you.
Okay, so he's promoting the conference. It's at the Ark Encounter. There you go. Answers in Genesis. That is Ken Ham's ministry and website. In passing here briefly, I want you to hear what he says about H.B. Charles. Again,
we'll be speaking there. H.B. Charles will be speaking there. I've met H.B. Charles once, just briefly, but he's a great guy.
He says he's a great guy. He's met him once briefly, and he's a great guy. Now, I cover this in much more detail in a video entitled, Did Justin Peters Just Expose John MacArthur? This is what the thumbnail looks like. There's a picture of John MacArthur hugging Jack Graham, who is part of the Hillsong Network and a friend of T.D. Jakes, and a dime a dozen heretics, endorsed Paula White's book, you name it. He is a partner in ministry with John MacArthur. Justin Peters has never and will never address this. In that video is a more detailed account of H.B. Charles and his corruptions. But because John MacArthur bestowed some honor upon him, I think he, I don't know if it was an honorary doctorate or if he graduated from the masters. In any event, John MacArthur and H.B. Charles are close, and John MacArthur crowned him with some achievement, and that's all it takes. Because John MacArthur has become an idol for most people, certainly Justin Peters, if John MacArthur endorses somebody, he necessarily does and will. He will never contradict it. It doesn't matter that Jack Graham is part of the Hillsong Network and a complete and utter deceiver. Justin Peters will never address this. So if you want more details on all of that, please see. But Justin Peters says out of his own mouth that H.B. Charles is a great guy.
But he's a great guy.
He's a great guy. Now here's H.B. Charles, just briefly. This is Rick Warren, 2018. Hey, brother H.B. Charles. Saddleback members are still raving about your message. It was a home run over the fence, and that ball is still soaring. Thanks for filling in for me so I could help our new Museum of the Bible in D.C. Yes, H.B. Charles went to Saddleback Church to preach for Rick Warren. And no, he didn't go to set Saddleback Church straight for their seeker-sensitive, wayward theology. He went there to fellowship with them and effectively with Rick Warren. Here's H.B. Charles' reply. Thanks for trusting me with your pulpit. It was an honor for him. It was a joy to serve the good people of Saddleback in your absence. All the best. This is ministerial fellowship. And this is by no means isolated. H.B. Charles, this is him at Prestonwood Baptist Church men's conference with such names as Michael Brown and Sammy Rodriguez. These are people that Justin Peters himself has critiqued on numerous occasions. These are men who are in what is generally termed the New Apostolic Reformation. Their theology is aberrant, to say the least. Justin Peters himself knows this. And yet H.B. Charles is a conference partner of both Michael Brown and Sammy Rodriguez. Not to mention preaching at Saddleback Church with Rick Warren, and believe me, it's the tip of the iceberg. Already you can see, again, a continuing pattern of absolute hypocrisy or just staggering ignorance, neither of which are excusable, especially in this realm. So while these men profess to have discernment, they are ushering in deception. H.B. Charles is no man of God. He is a deceiver, but because John MacArthur approves of him, Justin Peters does as well. Follow the leader, but their leader isn't Jesus. And that's just in passing. So Justin Peters is promoting the Ark Encounter event with Ken Ham. Well, there's another one. Truth Matters Conference. That was this year, May of 2022. Okay? Truth matters. Ironically, for them, no, it doesn't. The enterprise matters. But the venue was Answers Center at the Ark Encounter. This is Ken Ham's Ark Encounter, obviously. So we'll look at the speakers here. Of course, we've got John MacArthur, Ken Ham, Phil Johnson, John MacArthur's right-hand man, and Justin Peters. Okay, and a few others as well, but those are the men that we're going to focus on for the purpose and scope of this video. Justin Peters, Phil Johnson, Ken Ham, John MacArthur. These are conference partners. They have been. All of them are intertwined and interconnected, and you're going to see that develop as we go through this. At that very conference, here is what Justin Peters said.
When you turn on TBN, when you turn on Daystar, who do you see? You see, all Christian television is a function of supply and demand. That's all it is. Whatever the demand is, that's what they're going to supply. And so when you turn on TBN, Daystar, and these other Christian networks, who do you see? You don't see John MacArthur. You don't see Steve Lawson. You don't see Mike Riccardi. You don't see Owen Strand. You don't see any of the speakers here, Darrell Harrison or Phil Johnson. You don't see any expositors. This is what you see. Why? Because that's what the demand is.
It's no big secret that Justin Peters is not a fan of TBN, nor am I, nor should you be. It's awful, but what he just said there is actually not true. As you're going to see, and I'll try to put chapters in this video, but as you're going to see, we'll get to John MacArthur toward the end of the video. John MacArthur has appeared on TBN at least twice just this year. At least twice just this year. This is an interview with Phil Johnson and Justin Peters post Strange Fire in 2014. Listen carefully to what they say about those who partner with TBN.
Tagging off of that, I wonder, would you have any comments? Upwards of 97, 98% of what you see on TBN and Daystar and Inspiration, all this is exactly what we're talking about. Every once in a while, you'll see one of the supposedly good guys on there. And I have seen one of the very prominent good guys, pastor in California.
He's talking about David Jeremiah. We'll get into that briefly, but that's who he's referencing here.
And I've enjoyed some of his teaching, and he's not Word of Faith, he's not charismatic, but he was on the set of TBN with Paul Crouch when, Paul Crouch is dead now, but this was about 2 years ago, with Paul Crouch, arm in arm with him, raising money for TBN, praising Paul Crouch, and actually preached a sermon to get people to give money to TBN. Is that a problem? Is that a problem?
That's a serious problem for me, because I think it's a violation of every principle Scripture gives us of how to deal with false teachers. I quoted in my message tonight from Galatians 1, where Paul says, if somebody comes with a different gospel, let him be accursed. And that's loaded with implications. If he's accursed, we're not to have anything to do with him. Romans 16 forbids us to have anything to do with someone who's that far away from the apostolic truth, the gospel. 2 John, that's what the little epistle of 2 John is all about.
Right.
It says when somebody comes, and they don't have the doctrine of Christ, that's the way John says it. But I think that's an equivalent phrase of what Paul says in Galatians 1, where he says a different gospel. So he's not saying, if you disagree with them on some minor doctrine, cast them out. But he's saying, if their message substantially changes the doctrine of Christ, that is the doctrine, the gospel Christ himself taught and preached, then John says in 2 John, don't admit him into your house, don't even give him a greeting. And he goes on to say, the one who gives him a greeting becomes a partaker in his evil deeds. Well, if you become a partaker in his evil deeds by simply showing him honor, that's what it means to give a greeting. It was a kind of ceremonial honor bestowed on him. Then certainly you become an inexcusable participant in his evil deeds if you're actively raising money in support for the guy. So yeah, I have a serious problem with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
As he should. What these guys tend to do, and their defenders and so forth, is they will invoke the term guilt by association. These are people that don't even know what this fallacy entails. They clearly have never read an introductory philosophy book in their lives, but they will regurgitate the phrase because it's an easy deflection. They can't discern between association and cooperation or participation. Again, even Phil Johnson acknowledging what the Scriptures clearly teach, that to aid and abet falsehood is to partake in it. We have laws concerning these things as well. We have laws on treason and aiding and abetting and so forth, harboring felons and criminals and so forth. These are all crimes. You help the crime persist. So yes, if you welcome someone in, you bid them Godspeed, so to speak, right? You endeavor in ministerial partnership with them. You are a partaker in their evil deeds. If you're at a conference with somebody, if you're under the banner of Christ doing ministry with somebody, that is effectively to welcome them into your home and to greet them, to worship alongside them, and they are bringing aberrant doctrine, it is to partake in their wicked deeds. Even Eli in 1 Samuel chapter 3 was judged for the sins of his sons because what he knew he failed to restrain. So despite the fact that Eli wasn't the one that committed the sin, he knew what was happening, and he had some authority to restrain it more than he did. Even though he confronted it to a degree, he didn't restrain it to the degree that he could have. And so God judged him and his household because of it. Again, the verse we cited in Revelation just a minute ago. Come out of her, my people, lest you share in her sins and receive of her plagues. This is a phrase directed at my people, says God. My people can share in other people's sins and receive of their plagues. That's what it says. So people like to invoke a guilt by association, betraying their ignorance of both philosophy and the Bible. They don't know what the term means. A burglar had black hair. You have black hair. You must be a burglar too. That's guilt by association. When you're partnering with somebody under the banner of Christ, that is cooperation. That is partnership. That is 2 John 11, partaking in evil deeds. Now listen carefully to that last sentence.
The kind of ceremonial honor bestowed on him, then certainly you become an inexcusable participant in his evil deeds if you're actively raising money in support for the guy.
An inexcusable participant in his evil deeds if you're actively raising money for the guy. Here is Ken Ham, ladies and gentlemen, ministry partner of Phil Johnson and Justin Peters on TBN. This is their official YouTube channel. This is a literal fundraiser. You can see down here at the bottom, fundraiser. This was posted September 3rd, 2021, less than a year ago. You can see the amount that was raised here. Total raised, $29,220. Ken Ham, by their own standard, is an inexcusable participant in the evil deeds of TBN. TBN, which in Justin Peters' estimation is the foremost exporter of theological poison. This is their ministry partner doing a literal fundraiser for TBN. Will you ever hear Phil Johnson and Justin Peters denounce this behavior? Not on your life. Why? Because they have too much to lose. Because John MacArthur approves of Ken Ham. Because they do conferences with Ken Ham. So, sure, if you're David Jeremiah, they're all too happy to call it out. But if you're their friend and conference partner, they'll look the other way. Why? Well, because, as this thumbnail points out, they are staggering hypocrites. And if you continue to follow them, you will become one too. Matt Crouch, who has formally received the mantle from his father, Paul Crouch Sr., back here September of 2015. And I'm going to jump ahead here just a minute. Where is it? It's not just Ken Ham. It's Ray Comfort. Their friend Ray Comfort. Here he is on TBN with Kirk Cameron, all of their mutual friend. Again, another fundraising video on TBN. Fundraiser. The literal word fundraiser is there. Total raised $56,151. Ken Ham and Ray Comfort, both in actual literal fundraising videos on TBN's official YouTube channel with the dollar amount visible. They are, by Phil Johnson and Justin Peters' own standard, not to mention the Bible's, inexcusable participants in the wicked deeds of TBN. Look what Justin Peters says. When it comes to Beth Moore, 2019. Beth Moore partnering with and endorsing Matt and Lori Crouch, heads of the world's foremost exporter of theological poison, TBN. Brian Houston, and he lists, Joel Osteen is there as well. And then he cites these two scriptures. See Romans 16:17 and 2 John 9 through 11. Romans 16:17 says what? We are to mark and avoid those who are teaching things contrary to sound doctrine. Mark them and avoid them. 2 John 9 through 11, as even Phil Johnson just went through, says to greet someone, to welcome them, is to partake in their evil deeds. Justin Peters criticizes Beth Moore for that. Somebody tries to give the out to Beth Moore, or maybe she sees this as an opportunity to speak truth in a sphere where it's so often distorted. I'll point out that you will often hear this exact excuse from the followers of John MacArthur and Justin Peters and so forth. The very things that you'll see from Beth Moore supporters or even Benny Hinn supporters as defenses or justifications, they're the same exact defenses used by the defenders of John MacArthur. They'll say the same thing. Justin Peters says, no. She has preached at Lakewood Church. She endorses and partners with known false teachers and prophets like Christine Caine, false prophets, and Joyce Meyer. In fact, she absolutely lavishes praise on them. I have this documented in my DVD, Clouds Without Water. I'm sure he does. Does he have documented in his DVD Ken Ham with Matt and Lori, with Matt Crouch and his, I guess that's his son, maybe his son or grandson? I think it's his son, Cody. Does he have this documented in his Clouds Without Water? Can we expect an update to the Clouds Without Water series of Ken Ham and Ray Comfort doing TBN fundraisers? You'll never see it. You will never see it because Justin Peters is a liar and a hypocrite. When Beth Moore does it, it doesn't affect him. But these people are his friends. Beth Moore can't disinvite him from a conference at the Ark Encounter, but Ken Ham can. And because Justin Peters loves himself more than he loves truth, he'll never say a word about it. Phil Johnson, praising Ken Ham. Ken Ham with a brilliant message on the disastrous consequences of our culture's collective worldview when the truth of Scripture is abandoned. You mean like the truth of Scripture, that we are to mark and avoid those preaching false doctrine? That we are inexcusable participants in their evil deeds if we're helping raise money for them? So when Ken Ham abandons the truth of Scripture to do a fundraiser video with Matt Crouch on TBN, Phil Johnson has nothing to say. Why? Because he is a hypocrite. It's not that he doesn't know what the principle is, it's that he applies it only to those that don't affect him. Grace Church, Phil Johnson and Ken Ham in Answers in Genesis have a nice partnership worked out. They hold their Truth Matters conference at the Ark Encounter. What a great gig that is. And therefore, these men will never say a word. Ken Ham says this: join me at TBN as part of the live studio audience as I chat with Matt and Lori Crouch on creation and evolution. I'd love to see you there. Now he's inviting people to the TBN studio. When Ken Ham does it, Justin Peters is nowhere to be found. When Beth Moore does it, it's inexcusable, and he cites Romans 16 and 2 John 9 through 11. You see the double standard that God's word calls an abomination? Justin Peters is also an inexcusable participant in these evil deeds. Something like Eli, the sin that he knows and fails to restrain, fails to even address. He just pretends it isn't there. So Ken Ham can do whatever he wants. Let's listen to Justin's feigned outrage.
God doesn't need us, doesn't need Southern Baptist Convention or any other denomination. He doesn't need these things. God does not need TBN. He does not need Daystar. He does not need the Inspirational Network. It's time for the good guys to stop associating with the bad guys. It's time for... Not long ago, David Jeremiah, good preacher, goes on the set of TBN. It's one thing to have your own self-contained program on TBN. That's one thing. But to go on...
Pause. Stop right there. I pointed this out in a previous video. What he just said there, that caveat, is ludicrous. It's one thing to have your own self-contained program on TBN. No, that one thing that it is itself an act of treason against Jesus Christ. You cannot participate with TBN and be on their network without producing things in accord with their doctrinal disposition. You can't have videos on TBN critiquing all things that are on TBN aside from yourself. You won't have a program, a self-contained program on TBN any longer. There is no such thing as a self-contained program on TBN. TBN is a ministry. It is not open to the general public. It's not like YouTube or Facebook where anybody can come and it's a digital sidewalk of sorts. That's not what TBN is. TBN is a contractual agreement that is led by Matt Crouch. In fact, I think it's classed as a church where Matt Crouch is effectively the senior pastor of the organization. It has a doctrinal statement, an objective, right? So this caveat that he's inserting is, in all likelihood, now this was said in 2013, Kirk Cameron has been doing work on TBN for quite a while. I don't know for sure if he had a program on TBN at that time. He does now. We'll get into that shortly. But this seems to be a caveat invoked for the sake of dismissing maybe one of his friends who might have a quote-unquote self-contained program on TBN. So, no, it's not one thing to have a self-contained program. You cannot have a self-contained program on TBN that is not in agreement with TBN. It must be, because the moment you say TBN's awful, stop watching this, they will pull your program from TBN. It's a stupid statement. Let's continue.
Good guys to stop associating with the bad guys. It's time for... Not long ago, David Jeremiah, good preacher, goes on the set of TBN. It's one thing to have your own self-contained program on TBN. That's one thing. But to go on the set of TBN with Paul Crouch, in fellowship with him, break metaphorical bread with him. He praised Paul Crouch, praised TBN, raised money for TBN. And TBN and Daystar and all these, they are the tip of the spear in exporting this theological poison to the rest of the world. And as Conrad said this morning, this is becoming the face of Christianity in most of the world. What are the good guys doing going and raising money for this? They are giving these men legitimacy, a sense of legitimacy that they do not have on their own. Paul Crouch, Matt Crouch, Paul's son, loves to have the quote-unquote good guys on there, gives them legitimacy.
Like his friend Ken Ham? Mm-hmm.
I'm sick of the good old boy network.
Well, isn't that interesting? How is Justin Peters sick of the good old boy network when he is a part of the good old boy network? Here he is with Ken Ham, one of the good old boys. Justin Peters and Ken Ham, part of the good old boy network. Ken Ham is a friend of Matt Crouch. Ken Ham does fundraisers for TBN. Justin Peters is the good old boy network. It's funny that he's so sick of it. I'm sick of the good old boy network. Justin Peters is a card-carrying member. Oh, but that feigned indignation directed at David Jeremiah. You know why? Because David Jeremiah isn't a part of his network, that's why. David Jeremiah has no influence on his career, and that's what this is for him. It's a career. David Jeremiah can't disinvite Justin Peters from a conference because he never invited him in the first place. But Ken Ham can. Justin Peters doesn't want to miss out on an opportunity to be a conference speaker with these big names, to go to the Ark Encounter. So despite the fact that he unblushingly says Matt Crouch loves to have the good guys on there, he doesn't tell you that some of those good guys are his friends, and he knows that's the case. This isn't new. It's not the first time Ken Ham has been on that program. Again, Phil Johnson praising Ken Ham. Look at this. Back in 2012, ladies and gentlemen, May 31st, 2012, TBN. Tonight on Praise the Lord, Matt and Lori Crouch host Dr. Hugh Ross. What do you know? Ken Ham, Ray Comfort, Kent Hovind, and some others. Sean McDowell. Right? A lot of people think Sean McDowell's a good guy. Oh, he's a great apologist. He's the son of Josh McDowell. That's got to account for something. The same Josh McDowell that was at the Fill the Mall event with Nick Hall and an address by Pope Francis, the Reset 2016 event. That Josh McDowell was there for that ecumenical absurdity. In any event, Ken Ham and Ray Comfort have been making appearances with Matt and Lori Crouch for at least a decade. Not once has Justin Peters ever addressed this. Not once. Why? Because he's a liar and he's a hypocrite. This is not new, is the point. This is Ken Ham praying with Matt Crouch. They're praying. Listen.
In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Beautiful. Dr. Ken, this whole program led up to that moment.
Well, that's what it's all about.
That's what it's all about.
That's what it's
and
all
by
about.
the way, to those that are watching, whoever's watching, there's a telephone number on your screen. It's been there for 45 years. It's available to you now. Someone will answer that phone, talk to you about it. We'd love to hear from you. And if you want to make that decision right here, right now, based upon what Dr. Ken has been talking about all program, there's somebody on the other line that'll.
They're encouraging people to call TBN while Ken Ham sits there, gives his stamp of approval while he prays and says amens with the world's foremost exporter of theological poison, and Justin Peters, the hypocrite, is nowhere to be found. Matt Crouch and Ken Ham are in ministerial fellowship, ladies and gentlemen, and they have been. The reason that video is sped up, by the way, and I've done this with a few, I'm doing my best to curb this. I filmed this video last night, and there were 2 copyright, not strikes, but copyright claims levied by, one by TBN and Kirk Cameron, and the other by Ray Comfort, some group called Matter Media. And so if you see any ads on this video, I didn't put them there. This channel is not monetized. It was demonetized by me. There's no ads put on this channel by me. But if there is a copyright claim levied, they can put ads on this video, even for a 10-second clip, whether I like it or not. So I've sped up some of these videos to hopefully circumvent that, and am refilming this entire thing, which I didn't want to do, in an effort to hopefully not allow them to make money off of this video. So that's why some of these videos are sped up. I'm doing the best I can to try to get around their ridiculous claims, but leave it to Ray Comfort to issue one of them. No surprise there. Remember what Doreen Virtue did, one of Justin Peters' friends. She leveled two fraudulent copyright claims against this channel, both of which were overturned, by the way, and penalties on her end. But these people abuse the copyright system. No, those were strikes. These are just claims. But when you levy a claim, you can monetize somebody else's videos, and that's what they're trying to do. So I'm trying to get around that. In any event, just as a side note, this is Justin Peters with his friend Ken Ham, who prays with Matt Crouch, as Matt Crouch is encouraging people to call TBN so they can lead them in the faith. Ken Ham stands right by it. He doesn't contradict him once. He never says, hey, listen, Matt, I'm here to give people the truth of the gospel and to tell them that you're actually theological poison. He doesn't say that. He is there to market his Ark Encounter. That's what these shows are for. They are avenues for marketing where people go to promote books or events or something like that. It's exactly like a worldly talk show. It's identical. Justin Peters, part of the Good Old Boys Network. Okay. As we said, Kirk Cameron and Ray Comfort doing another TBN fundraiser. Now again, Ray Comfort wasn't with Matt Crouch on this particular show, but it is a TBN show. Matt Crouch is the president of TBN. He is the official mantle holder of Paul Crouch's heretical mantle. And Kirk Cameron is employed by him, does business with him, and exports theological poison on behalf of his blasphemous masters. And Ray Comfort is there with his friend, raising upwards of $56,000. This isn't a Kirk Cameron fundraiser, ladies and gentlemen. This is a TBN fundraiser. Join TBN in sharing the gospel around the world. Ray Comfort is helping TBN make money to export theological poison, but because that's Justin Peters' friend, he won't say a word about it. Let's listen to this.
Because you've understood the disease, so you understand the cure, appreciate the cure. So,
if you could look back and identify someone who made the biggest difference for you in your life.
Well, for me, Charles Spurgeon was the big game changer.
Explain who
he was
is.
called the Prince of Preachers, an eloquent English preacher that if he talked in his sleep, he'd be quotable.
He says Charles Spurgeon was the game changer for him. It's astounding to me that he says this. Charles Spurgeon lost friends during something called the downgrade controversy because he refused to participate with compromised individuals in even the pretense of fellowship. To even pretend fellowship, he said, would be an act of treason in these cases. For example, Charles Spurgeon would not have gone on TBN to do a fundraiser video with an individual like Kirk Cameron. The fact that he's quoting Charles Spurgeon, of all people, is astounding to me. Charles Spurgeon wouldn't be caught dead on a thing like TBN. Leave it to the men that quote him to do things he would never do, right? Then you'll see a pattern of that. I talked about this at length in a video called Calvinist Conmen, dealing with, I think it was Josh Bice, another one of their friends in the Reform Circle, right? These men are all too eager to quote Charles Spurgeon. When you read about what this man did and his beliefs, it's interesting to note that there are many people, non-Calvinists, who actually have more in common with Charles Spurgeon than the neo-Calvinists today. They're a bunch of hypocrites. They love the idea of the heritage of it all. But as you can see, Ray Comfort helping export theological poison to the tune of over $56,000. And Justin Peters, part of the Good Old Boys Network, nowhere to be found. Unsurprising, isn't it? Now, I want you to pay attention to this photo. This was posted by Emil E.Z. Zwain, right? His nickname is E.Z. That is Ray Comfort's son-in-law. Having a blast here at the Truth Matters conference at the Ark Encounter in Kentucky, enjoying a rich time of fellowship in Ken Ham's office with Mark Spence, Owen Strachan, Justin Peters, Mr. Ham, and Lalo Gunther. Okay? Emil Zwain, just briefly, this goes back a long way. Okay? Emil is Ray Comfort's son-in-law. I want you to just see how interconnected this whole group is. Todd Friel, Ray Comfort, and Kirk Cameron were all part of Way of the Master Radio years ago. Okay? Todd Friel of Wretched Radio, a close friend of Justin Peters and Phil Johnson. All of these men are very closely connected, which is why they don't talk about each other. How close? Well, let's meet the board of Wretched Radio, Gospel Partners Media. On the board is, well, what do you know? Phil Johnson, and Emil E.Z. Zwane. Of course, down here you have Todd Friel. So Ray Comfort's son-in-law, Emil, and Phil Johnson, the director of Grace to You and friend of Justin Peters, are board members of Wretched Radio with Todd Friel, the same Todd Friel who has been a longtime friend and partner to Kirk Cameron and Ray Comfort. Starting to get the picture? These men cannot afford to call each other out. It's bad for business. They simply can't. Now, Emil's official title, EZ, at Way of the Living Waters, is the president. He is the president of Living Waters Ministries. Ray Comfort, of course, the founder. And there's their friend Mark Spence, senior vice president. We saw Mark Spence up here with Justin Peters the day he went to go film with them. He loves these guys. They're the real deal, he says. Okay. So, the president of Ray Comfort's ministry is also on the board of directors, co-director with Phil Johnson of Todd Friel's ministry. Todd Friel, who has for years been a friend and partner to Ray Comfort and Kirk Cameron. All of these things are very important. Okay, we'll continue. Here is Ray Comfort back in 2017 with Matt and Lori Crouch.
This subject and many more that Ray takes on behalf of us, on behalf of the body of Christ. First of all, Ray, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for what you do. Partner with Ray. The information is on the screen. Donate to his ministry. Let him continue to do these subjects. And thank you, Ray, for being our guest. We'll see you next time.
Yep, there's Ray partnering with Matt and Lori Crouch, the world's foremost exporters of theological poison. I pointed this out in the PureFlix video that we talked about at the very beginning. This one here. Let me reduce the size there. I talked about that in this video. After this video began to gain some traction, Justin Peters and Ray Comfort began to get some pushback because this was upsetting, rightly, to people that had followed his ministry, that he was partnering with TBN people, accepting their praises, peddling his wares on TBN. So Justin Peters issues a damage control statement just about 2 weeks after the video. I published that video in September of 2019, I think mid or late September. Justin Peters puts this statement up October 3rd of 2019 because he had been getting so much pushback. So he says this. First, it starts with this picture. I have something to say to those critical of Ray Comfort and my friendship with and support of him. It is too long to put in a tweet, so please read the attached screenshot, he says. Here's what he says. I know some of you have expressed disappointment in my friendship with and high regard for Ray Comfort due to him publicly appearing with some of the very people I critique in my seminar. Notice how he fails to apprise you of who those people are. Why is it so vague? You never heard Justin Peters so vague. He calls out Beth Moore by name. He calls out David Jeremiah by name. But he won't even talk about the heretic by name when it's associated with his friend. You can already see the spin doctoring. What you could not know is that the other day, Ray and I had a wonderful in-person conversation about that very thing, and he received my encouragement to be careful more graciously. Very graciously, sorry. Did he have a wonderful in-person conversation with David Jeremiah too before blasting him publicly? No. No, because what David Jeremiah did was public, and it should have been addressed publicly. Same for Ray Comfort. Completely different standard. Why? Because they're hypocrites. He says, he received my encouragement to be more careful very graciously, as if Ray Comfort was some new believer. This man's been doing ministry for, 30 years? And he didn't know what TBN was? He didn't know who Matt and Lori Crouch were? He didn't know who Joyce Meyer was. Yes, he's been on her program too. So you had to tell Ray Comfort to be more careful about going on arguably the most known heretical broadcast in existence, TBN? If Ray Comfort didn't know that TBN was bad, he should never open his mouth again. After 30 years, if he didn't know who or what TBN was, the man is willfully ignorant. But suddenly, Justin Peters is encouraging him to be more careful. I didn't hear him encouraging David Jeremiah to be more careful. I heard him angry about the Good Old Boys Network. Angry that what are the good guys doing with the bad guys? It's time for the good guys to stop partnering with the bad guys. He said that back in 2013. You know, several years later, now he's encouraging Ray Comfort. Why? He has different standards for his friends. He can't afford to not be invited to another nice conference. Justin just wants a seat with the cool kids. That's what it is. Somebody left that comment the other day. There's this desperation about him. Pick me, pick me. Go along to get along. Ray wants to honor Christ in everything that he does, and this area is no exception. Really? Then why isn't Ray saying it himself? Why is Justin Peters saying this for him? Because Ray doesn't care about the honor of Christ. He cares about his business. That's it. Why wouldn't Ray come out and say, you know what? I can't believe it. I actually partnered with the world's foremost exporter of theological poison. That's how ignorant I am. I'm sorry. I repudiate it. I've called Matt and Lori Crouch and told them to get my face off of TBN. And I told the whole world that they're false teachers. He didn't say that. That's how much he cares about the honor of Christ. I was so encouraged by our conversation, he says. Ray is doing the right thing, and I know of no one who has a greater desire to see the lost saved. That's why he goes on TBN. Such a great desire, he'll partner with the devil himself. He'll do evil that good might come, exactly what the Bible says not to do. That's how much he cares for the lost. He sent me this text, oh, how personal, and said I could use it should the question come up. Thank you again for wisdom. You gave me a better perspective on the issue of agreeing to do interviews. That wasn't a mere interview. He was selling stuff on the program, and he's been going on TBN, as we showed, for over a decade. I have been unwise with some in the past, but I will be much more careful in the future, Ray Comfort. Well, that's a lie. He hasn't been more careful. It's arguably gotten worse. Justin Peters says, this is the model for how all of us should receive loving biblical correction. My esteem and love for Ray Comfort has only increased. That is not the model. If Ray Comfort had actually repented and been remorseful of his unwise decision, putting it mildly, he would have made a public statement himself and said, TBN is bad, everyone should stay away, Matt and Lori Crouch are false teachers, and my friend Kirk Cameron is an absolute hypocrite for having his own show on TBN. No, Ray Comfort says nothing of the sort. Instead, he goes on TBN and is doing a fundraiser. This is September 1st, 2021 is when this is posted. September 1st, 2021, Ray Comfort raising $56,000 on behalf of the world's foremost exporter of theological poison. So much for being careful in the future. But he's doing it with Kirk Cameron. Who's getting that money? TBN. The people who write Kirk Cameron's checks. Excuses, excuses. No statement from Ray Comfort himself. Justin Peters did this damage control for his own sake primarily, and secondarily for Ray Comfort's. Come on, Ray, give me something that I can use, hopefully, on your behalf. Give me something, anything. And that's what he did. This is an article that Justin Peters himself shared on his Facebook page. You can find it on there. But Justin Peters himself shared it. It is there. Avoid Greg Laurie and Harvest America. Here's what it says. Greg Laurie, so Justin Peters didn't write this, but he agrees with the contents. Greg Laurie and Harvest America have pointed people to at least two dangerous ministries. He has pointed to the ministries of Jensen Franklin and Robert Morris. I did an entire apostasy report about Greg Laurie, over 3 hours long. I don't disagree that Greg Laurie is dangerous. If you go to the endorsement page of Harvest America, you'll see he has accepted and promoted the endorsements of Jensen Franklin and Robert Morris. Indeed. Laurie is giving them credibility by accepting and promoting their endorsements. The assumption is that these are two safe people to do ministry with. This is much different than sharing a stage at a conference or getting a friendly backstage picture taken with them. This is beyond that level of guilt by association. Well, everything was good in this article up until that last point, which is foolish. It is not much different than sharing a stage at a conference. In fact, sharing a stage at a conference is worse, right? The people that wrote this are the prime example of something that we've mentioned earlier. They don't even know what the term guilt by association means. Right? Why would you take a friendly backstage picture with a heretic anyway? Right? Why would you do that? Why are you being friendly with a heretic? And if you're sharing a stage with them, you are engaged in the actual act of some ministerial endeavor. You are doing ministry under the banner of Christ. To share a stage with them is even worse than accepting an endorsement. So it's a foolish statement that they are using to take some pressure off of men like John MacArthur, who are guilty of the same things. Well, he didn't accept that person's endorsement. He just did a conference with them instead. It's ridiculous. But anyway, everything else is correct. They introduce these nonsensical caveats to shield themselves from criticism. Laurie is overtly and in your face saying he values their recommendation. Okay, I agree. You don't tend to value things you think aren't worthy of a certain level of trust. Agreed. These two are not worthy of any level of Christian trust or credibility. I agree with that as well. So, the standard is Greg Laurie is bad, at least because he has accepted the endorsements of Jensen Franklin and Robert Morris, and to accept their endorsement is effectively to give your endorsement back. I don't disagree. Now let's look at some of the endorsements, now that we have Justin Peters' own agreed-upon standard. Let's look at some of the endorsements on Living Water's website. Here is Ray Comfort's son-in-law, Emil. Let's look at some of the commendations under here. Of course, you got Ray Comfort, you got Kirk Cameron, and Ken Ham, obviously. All right, Todd Friel is under there, right? Todd Friel, good friend of Living Waters Ministries, of course. Eric Hovind and some others. Okay. But in any event, we got Kirk Cameron. Let's see, Mark Spence. All right, who do we got under here? Usual suspects, Ray Comfort, Ken Ham, Todd Friel, they all endorse him. Oh, there you go, Kirk Cameron, yet again. And who else? Who's that? Oh, Candace Cameron, his sister. Candace Cameron Bure, I think is how you say it. Most people remember her from the 90s sitcom Full House, right? Mark is a bold Christian on the front lines who finds a way to make things happen. His ability to step out of his comfort zone and accomplish things for God has changed my family's life. I thank God for him, right? So Living Waters Ministries accepts the endorsements of Candace Cameron and Kirk Cameron, all right? So they are telling you that these are trustworthy people to do ministry with, according to Justin Peters' own agreed-upon standard in this article. Laurie is giving them credibility by accepting and promoting their endorsement. Laurie is overtly and in your face saying he values their recommendation. Okay? Well, same for Living Waters. They value the recommendations of Kirk Kirk and Candace Cameron. All right. Here's a tweet from Candace Cameron Bure, however you say it. My brother Kirk Cameron and I have been putting together this special night. It is going to be an amazing event. We are calling it Hope Rising. Live on Facebook, Sunday, April 19th. Let's look at this promo.
Hope Rising, a benefit featuring music by Mercy Me, Casting Crowns for King and Country, Gloria Gaynor, Kirk Franklin, Newsboys, Matthew West, Carrie Job and Cody Carnes, Natalie Grant, Matt Hammett, Danny Goki, Unspoken, and many more. With
Just real quick, I want you to notice Matt Hammett right there. Matt Hammett, we'll come back to that in a little bit.
With messages from Franklin Graham, T.D. Jakes, Kristen Chenoweth, Lisa Turkhurst, Priscilla Shire, Danny and Dana, and more. Hosted by Kirk Cameron and Candace Cameron Bure. Streaming live at hoperising.live. Hope Rising, April 19th at 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific.
Messages by T.D. Jakes. I want you to notice their slogan here. United through music and message, right? So they are united under the banner of Christ. This is a ministry endeavor. They were doing fundraising, some kind of COVID relief fundraising. Raising money to help people is one thing. If you have to unite under the banner of Christ with false teachers, it is an act of treason against Jesus. It's plain and simple. It is never right to do a little evil that good might come. Let's look at the Christian Post article. Kirk Cameron, T.D. Jakes, Gloria Gaynor, Mercy Me, etc. So, you have Kirk Cameron billed with one of the most outspoken and biggest names in heresy, the prosperity preaching, Trinity denying modalist T.D. Jakes. That's who Kirk and Candace Cameron do ministry with. There he is. I've covered For King and Country is a complete joke. All of these people are. I covered them in the Greg Laurie video, perhaps even in the Christian music video. But in any event, Kirk and Candace Cameron Bure are doing conferences with heretics like T.D. Jakes. Let's listen to Kirk.
But my sister Candace and I thought, wouldn't it be great to have a benefit that really points everyone to our provider, the one who is our healer, the one who brings us comfort, the one...
Notice what the goal of this concert is, this whole event. It's to point people to their provider, right? It's all about God, as he's putting it. That's the whole point of it, is to point people to God. What better way to do that than to enlist heretics and blasphemers like T.D. Jakes, right?
Our provider, the one who is our healer, the one who brings us comfort, the one who's going to get us through this challenging time in a way that is going to raise people's hopes, that's going to raise funds for the victims of the virus, and is ultimately going to strengthen people's faith and help them learn lessons through all of this. So we called it Hope Rising.
Notice one of the goals is to strengthen your faith.
And we've had some friends that have pulled so many strings to get the most amazing people all throughout Christian entertainment to join in. Mercy Me, Newsboys, Casting Crowns, Carrie Job, For King and Country, Franklin Graham, T.D. Jakes, so many people. My sister Candace has just been letting everybody know, and it's going to be an awesome time. Hope everybody checks it out.
T.D. Jakes, he calls one of the most amazing people in Christian entertainment. One of the most amazing people that will strengthen your faith. I believe T.D. Jakes was in the Left Behind movie that starred Kirk Cameron back in the year 2000. This is what Kirk Cameron promotes, ladies and gentlemen. He is not only an employee of TBN, as we've already seen, and we'll get into more now. He and his sister actively promote Trinity-denying modalists. This man doesn't even believe in the triune nature of God, a really basic, fundamental doctrine of Orthodox Christianity. That is the discretion of Kirk Cameron, who is heartily co-endorsed by Ken Ham and Ray Comfort and Todd Friel. But he is a formal partner with TBN. He has his own program on the world's foremost exporter of theological poison network. And he interviews everyone from, where could we go with this? Everywhere. Francis Chan, did a whole video on him. Apostasy report on Francis Chan. He's basically taken a Catholic understanding of the Eucharist at this point. He has preached at IHOP with Mike Bickle, part of the New Apostolic Reformation. He has publicly stated unwaveringly that he loves Mike Bickle. He loves Matt Maher, who is a Catholic, right? Considers him a brother. I think he was washing the feet of some Catholics at the Catholic Ecumenical Track at one of the IHOP conferences. Francis Chan is a massive deceiver and has only become worse even since the video I posted. But these are some of the people that Kirk Cameron puts his stamp of approval on. You've got people like Elisa Childers going on his program, Ann Voskamp, Mike Huckabee, Dennis Prager. I think he's a Catholic. Of course, his sister's up here. We've got John Cooper from Skillet. I did a whole video about him. Look it up. A lot of people think he's relatively sound. This man endorsed the Shack, William P. Young's Universalist theology. John Cooper endorses it. I believe he even participated in the soundtrack. But he did a whole interview with William P. Young and just sung the praises of the Shack. Yes, that's how sound John Cooper is. He's an absolute fraud. Please watch the video. Right? His opposition to some apparent problems in Christianity, it's very selective. And that's what's deceiving about it. He appears to speak out about certain problems while he's endorsing William P. Young and his Universalist theology in the Shack. Right? What good is it to call out those problems if you're going to endorse arguably worse? And then, of course, you got Ray Comfort, who's appeared on Kirk Cameron's show a couple of times. There he is. Here's an interview he did with Dallas Jenkins, The Meaning of Christmas. Yes, Dallas Jenkins, the creator of the show The Chosen. Kirk Cameron doesn't stop. Dallas Jenkins, let's hear what he has to say. Well, before we listen to that, let's just note real quick the mission and goals of TBN. For nearly 50 years, the mission of the Trinity Broadcast Network has remained unchanged: to use every available means to reach as many individuals and families as possible with the life-changing gospel of Jesus Christ. Justin Peters would not agree with this statement. He says they are the world's foremost exporter of theological poison, and I agree with him. Right? So their claim is that they are doing ministry. That is their whole goal. It is a mission for Jesus. This is not some general open to the public platform. It is a by invitation contractual agreement that you must be aligned with TBN in order to participate with TBN. Even on their history page, they have a whole section talking about their miraculous history. Then there's Paul and Jan Crouch. Right? So this is just the promotion of some of the most blasphemous nonsense available, PTL and so forth, right? So their whole history, their about section is the lauding of heresy. That's what Kirk Cameron is involved with. He does not contradict TBN. He is friends with them. He is a friend of Matt and Lori Crouch. He helps them raise money by doing his program on there, right? So he is, as much as David Jeremiah was doing a fundraiser, and that is, it makes him an inexcusable participant in their wicked deeds. How much more Kirk Cameron, who weekly helps TBN make money? That's the point of the show. He is weekly helping TBN garner viewership and thereby money, which is precisely why he's doing fundraiser videos for them. Kirk Cameron literally doing, in addition to his normal routine, fundraiser videos. $56,151. Kirk Cameron and Ray Comfort together. These men are both inexcusable participants in the wicked deeds of TBN. So here's Kirk Cameron interviewing Dallas Jenkins of The Chosen. Listen.
Our first guest is Dallas Jenkins. Dallas is the producer and the director of the largest crowd-funded media project of all time, The Chosen. Dallas, it's so good to see you. I want to talk with you about Christmas. Your life has been centered around Jesus in so many ways. Your dad wrote the Left Behind books, and so you've been talking about Jesus and looking at pictures of the Nativity probably for your whole life. Unlike me, who grew up as an atheist, Christmas was about Santa Claus and a new surfboard and coffee cake. Do you love Christmas as much as I do?
Oh, well, first of all, thank you so much for having me, Kirk. It's good to talk to you. It's been a few years, but yes, Christmas, but that it all started with him as this helpless baby.
I just want to point out real quick, he says, yeah, it's been a few years, but it's good to talk to you. Dallas Jenkins' father co-wrote the Left Behind books with Tim LaHaye, the books that were turned into the movie, which gave Kirk Cameron his start in mainstream evangelicalism back around the year 2000. So he's familiar with Dallas Jenkins. They've crossed paths before. And now he has him on his program to promote a Christmas with The Chosen special that was going to be on TBN. Listen.
Baby, I genuinely, at 46 years old, am more excited about it than I've ever been.
I'm blown away by the story myself, and the more that you dive into it, the more insights that you get, and you're helping us to get more insights through The Chosen and through Christmas with The Chosen. It's awesome. I'm kind of blown away by these statistics here. The Chosen's been viewed over 374 million times in more than 190 countries on all 7 continents. Dallas, do you think that this is indicating that people are having an increased hunger to know who God is?
Yeah,
okay.
Have.
Dallas, thanks so much for sharing all of this with us. Christmas with The Chosen, The Messengers, will be available to watch also here on TBN December 22nd at 9 p.m. Eastern. Here's a little preview.
Yes. Christmas with The Chosen, available on TBN. So there's Kirk Cameron endorsing The Chosen, singing the praises of his friend Dallas Jenkins and that entire program. Probably many of you have looked into The Chosen at this point and realized how problematic the entire show is. I uploaded a video which was a narration of an essay written by A.W. Tozer, originally titled The Menace of the Religious Movie, which also applies to The Chosen in general. While a lot of people have seen the problems with the theological construct of The Chosen, there is a question about the fundamental nature of religious movies in general, which I think is very interestingly explored by Tozer. I've never heard anybody else even address the topic as such. So if you want to hear a treatment about the problems of the very idea of religious movies, go listen to that. Nevertheless, The Chosen is one of the worst by virtue of all of the theology so publicly surrounding it. This is Dallas Jenkins. This is a podcast he did. This is an LDS podcast, a Mormon podcast. Listen to Dallas Jenkins and his sentiments on the Jesus of Mormonism.
A group effort in coming up with these questions for you. But first of all, I just want to establish right off the bat, Dallas, you are not a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which the majority of our audience are members of the church. And so for you, I have been told that you are a fierce defender of the Latter-day Saint belief in Jesus Christ. And that is something that honestly, on behalf of all of us, I just want to say thank you for that. But why is it that you are a defender of our belief in Jesus Christ?
Great. So you're starting off right out of the gate with the tough the question. I'm happy to answer that, and I just say that because I recently have gotten a little bit in trouble in certain circles because I was on another LDS podcast, and I said that LDS and evangelical love the same Jesus. And I got some heat from people who suddenly didn't want to watch the show anymore because of that. Apparently, it's a controversial statement, which I guess I would have known that a few years ago. But now that I've been...
It's not just a controversial statement, it is an absolutely blasphemous statement. It is not the same Jesus. The Jesus of Mormonism is a created being, not the eternal Son of God. In fact, God the Father in Mormonism is a created being. A Mormon, I don't know if you'd call it an axiom, slogan, something they don't tell you when they knock on your door. Mormons believe that as man now is, God once was. And as God now is, man may become. There are many, many created gods in Mormonism. You become a god. They don't tell you all of this when they knock on your door. It is so wildly blasphemous to make this assertion and to say, well, I guess it's a controversial statement. It's not just controversial. Dallas Jenkins is a satanic deceiver, and nothing short of it.
Working with my LDS brothers and sisters over the last couple of years and gotten to know them so well, I've learned quite a bit. And I come from a strong evangelical background, and
obviously not. He comes from a very weak evangelical background. And this is what happens, right? This is the fruit of mainstream marketing Christianity. His father was more interested in writing books, fictitious books, by the way. You can see the whole video I did on the pre-trib rapture deception for more on that. I understand why people believe it, but it doesn't make it any less wrong. I wouldn't anathematize somebody for believing it, but it is nevertheless wrong, and will set you up to stumble. So if you want more on the pre-trib rapture, I did a whole video deconstructing that. In any event, look at the fruit, right, of these mainstream mega-church produced rich kids, basically. Just a bunch of spoiled kids who throw the name of Jesus around and create careers for themselves. This is the fruit. The LDS are now his brothers and sisters.
I want to say this, and I've said this on a few conversations with LDS people, that there are reasons why I'm an evangelical and not LDS. I do have things theologically that I disagree with, or things that even just in kind of practice that aren't quite my speed in the LDS faith. However, one thing that is unabashedly true and unarguably true is that in getting to know some of my LDS friends here on this, especially through The Chosen, you're passionate about Jesus Christ, and it's Jesus of Nazareth. And when I hear people say...
It's one of the stupidest things I've ever heard. When he says it's unarguably true that Mormons are passionate about Jesus and it's the Jesus of Nazareth. Here's what's true in that statement. The words Jesus and Nazareth are used by Mormons. That's all that's true. What they mean by that is something entirely different, as if the Bible, as if Jesus himself didn't speak of false Christs arising, as if we weren't warned of false gospels, another gospel or another Christ that would emerge. This is arguably from Satan himself. So for him to say it's unarguably true that Mormons and Christians are both passionate about the Jesus of Nazareth is so wildly ridiculous and outside of mainstream orthodoxy since the inception of Mormonism as to make this a farce. That's how bad Dallas Jenkins is. That even people that I would disagree with about other things, perhaps like John MacArthur, would say this is foolish. Forget John MacArthur. Todd Friel himself of Wretched Radio has his own concerns. Here's what he said.
There are also Roman Catholic advisors on set. And the fellow who plays Jesus is Roman Catholic. Now, Dallas Jenkins is fine with that sort of ecumenism because he believes Mormons and Catholics are our brothers who believe in the same Jesus.
The stories of Jesus we do agree on, and we love the same Jesus. That's not something that you often hear. Sometimes it's like, oh, they believe in a different Jesus than we do.
Statement.
Yeah. No, it's the same. I mean, I'll sink or swim on that statement.
Well, then you will sink, and you are sinking into the pit of hell, Mr. Jenkins.
That couldn't be further from the truth. Mormonism teaches Jesus is a created being. That's heresy. Both Mormonism and Catholicism are work-based systems. They do not believe in grace alone, faith alone, in Christ alone. Is there any rank heresy in the Chosen? Not that I'm aware of, but if Mormons and Catholics on set are not offended by the Chosen, it is certainly not explicitly evangelical. Are you sure you want to consume a subpar Jesus that doesn't offend people in unorthodox sects of Christianity?
I don't disagree with what Todd is saying here. I would put it much more forcefully. If this man is teaching heresy, and he is, and it is directly linked to the show, whether or not it's taught in the actual show, these interviews are in tandem with the dissemination of the Chosen. This is to be a tainted mess. And you are supporting a man who is exporting his own theological poison. So I don't disagree with what Todd Friel's saying. He is certainly not putting the emphasis on it that it demands. If this man is teaching heresy, and he is to be marked and avoided, yes, and what he produces, especially when he is producing something supposedly in the name of God and for the glory of God, as he thinks. Again, listen to the message by Tozer on religious movies in general. So here's the question, though, for Todd Friel. If it's true that Dallas Jenkins is promoting heresy, and he is Todd Friel going to confront his friend Kirk Cameron for giving platform to Dallas Jenkins? Why has Todd Friel, who has been a longtime partner of Kirk Cameron and Ray Comfort with Way of the Master, Ray Comfort's own son-in-law being on Todd Friel's board of directors, when is Todd Friel going to confront Kirk Cameron for promoting a heretic like Dallas Jenkins? Answer, never. Never. He'll never do it. Why? Because he can't afford to. The same reason Justin Peters will never do it. He can't afford to. Why? Because Ray Comfort endorses Kirk Cameron. And Ray Comfort has too much influence and too much money over these men. Ray Comfort's son-in-law is on Todd's board of directors. He can't afford to. He's basically not allowed to. These men follow each other. They measure themselves by themselves, and Jesus has no place with them. If he did, you wouldn't see these perversions. Dallas Jenkins goes on to, he has this big round table with these Roman Catholics talking about their pretended born-again experience.
Catholic ordination rite. You lay prostrate on the ground while a song about the Holy Spirit, Veni Sancti Spiritus, Come Holy Spirit plays, and you're there.
You get the point. Dallas Jenkins believes that Catholics and Mormons are brothers. And I did a whole video on the Catholic Church. It's called Catholic Church Masterpiece of Deception, where the very fundamental tenets of Catholicism at root are broken down, why it is fundamentally a false gospel. There are thousands of things that could be said, but if you want more on those basic fundamental elements, if you come from a Catholic family or know some Catholics and so forth, I would commend it to you as a hopeful and a prayerful encouragement and tool in combating those lies. It is a false gospel. So is Mormonism. If we or an angel from heaven preach to you any other gospel, said Paul, let him be damned. Let him be accursed. That's what he said. Let him be accursed. If Catholicism and Mormonism don't preach a false gospel, then there is nothing on earth that can be categorized as such. If these are not false gospels, then nothing is a false gospel. Dallas Jenkins is a satanic deceiver whom Kirk Cameron lauds, promotes, and gives his glowing endorsement of. And why wouldn't he? Here he is with his friends Matt and Lori Crouch.
And now, Matt and Lori Crouch.
We are going to be talking about growing pains. Why would we talk about that?
I can't imagine. I certainly didn't have any. It's great to be here with you guys. Yeah.
Honor. This is
Thank you
fun.
for having me
Okay,
on Praise.
they had to remind me that we've actually never interviewed you on Praise before.
I think that's
So
correct.
this is a
But we sort of
just
orbit
crazy.
around a lot of the same people, and so
Around a lot.
We orbit around a lot of the same people, yes, because you all have the same wayward and theologically aberrant disposition. That's why they're orbiting around the same people.
Actually, I think had made up a praise in our minds that we really had, and we had spent this really meaningful time together. And you know, when you get my age, you kind of make things up anyway.
And you believe them.
Yeah. All right. So, Kirk Cameron.
That's just Kirk Cameron enjoying some time with his friends, the world's foremost exporters of theological poison. When Beth Moore does it, it's nearly the unpardonable sin. Justin Peters can't believe it. When Kirk Cameron does it, who is infinitely closer to Justin Peters than Beth Moore is, he has nothing to say. Justin Peters and Beth Moore don't have friends in common. Justin Peters and Kirk Cameron do. Ray Comfort, Ken Ham, Todd Friel, all of them very close to Kirk Cameron. Justin Peters won't touch Kirk Cameron because it would affect his business and his standing amongst his friends. And the approval of men means more to him than the approval of God. So when Kirk Cameron does exactly what Beth Moore does and worse, here he is. Kirk Cameron sits down with Matt and Lori Crouch on Praise on TBN. Kirk shares his challenges and triumphs in Hollywood. He promotes and endorses the world's foremost exporters of theological poison, and they also sign his paychecks, as he is a formal partner and member of TBN. Kirk Cameron goes way back with Ray Comfort and Ken Ham. They have been doing ministry together for years, and because Justin Peters is friends with these men as well, he will never call them out for their partnership with Kirk Cameron, who himself is a deceiver. Naivete is not an excuse at this point. He has been a Christian for how many years? Over 2 decades, so he says. And he's promoting Matt and Lori Crouch, Dallas Jenkins, Francis Chan. Kirk Cameron is deceiving and being deceived, both. But he has a Christian so-called program on a Christian so-called network. What's his excuse not to know these things? Answers in Genesis, Ken Ham's own website. Living Room Reset. Worship with Matt Hammett. Remember? Remember the guy that performed with T.D. Jakes and Kirk Cameron at the Hope Rising event? Well, there you go. A Living Room Reset with Kirk Cameron at the Ark Encounter. Right? Ken Ham, close personal friend of Kirk Cameron, who promotes his deceptive so-called ministry.
So I'm going to introduce to you, well, he needs no introduction. For those of you who are watching, one of the top celebrities from the 80s and 90s, TV star Kirk Cameron. You'll remember the popular show Growing Pains. Well,
Ken Ham goes on to sing his praises, and of course, Matt Hammett is down here as well. Kirk and Ken are longtime friends. They have been. They have been. You need to understand that Answers in Genesis and Living Waters Ministries are so closely connected. It's hard to separate them. They do so many things in tandem. Ray Comfort and Ken Ham are the opposite version of Paul and Barnabas. They're the dark version of Paul and Barnabas, something like that. There's a very close partnership between them. And we'll see an example of that in a minute. The point is, Kirk Cameron is a formal ministry partner. TBN, friend of Matt and Lori Crouch, who does ministry work with T.D. Jakes, promotes The Chosen and blasphemous theology of Dallas Jenkins, is a friend and partner of Ray Comfort and Ken Ham. And here's Ray Comfort back on Kurt's program. Again, this is posted this year, ladies and gentlemen, January 14th, 2022. Listen to what he says.
Ray, your style of evangelism has been going out onto the streets, and I've gone there with you. For years, we did the television show The Way of the Master, and you just ask people these crazy questions, like, what do you think happens when you die?
Notice he said, I've been going out with you for years, since Way of the Master. Kirk and Ray have been friends and ministry partners for years, and he concludes,
love them and realize that you've got the message of everlasting life and they haven't. And you've got it.
Ray, working with you and ministering alongside of you has revolutionized the way that I think about evangelism. And
ministering alongside of you. And that's exactly right. He ministers alongside Ray Comfort and Ken Ham. He is an active, formal partner and member of TBN, and thereby, this is on TBN, again, Kirk Cameron on TBN, ladies and gentlemen, the world's foremost exporter of theological poison, an inexcusable partner in their evil deeds. Phil Johnson and Justin Peters are silent concerning it. And why? Because Justin Peters wants to get more invites to conferences like this. Ironically, with titles like, learn how to combat lies. No, you will learn how to deceive others. You'll learn how to deceive yourself in wallowing hypocrisy. You'll learn how to make excuses for your friends, to show favoritism, and how to effectively kill discernment. How can you learn how to combat lies if you can't even call out Kirk Cameron or Ray Comfort for going on these programs? Or when you do, you make excuses for him so he doesn't have to do it himself. This conference invitation means more to these men than the truth does. Truth doesn't matter. The enterprise matters. So back in 2014, Mark Spence says this.
But this is what happens. When you stand up for truth, you're going to have people shooting their spit wads over at you because they can't stand that you stand for truth.
Right.
Mark, I like what you said about prosperity preachers. I try and distance myself as far as I can from prosperity preachers. I was yesterday in a...
When you stand for truth, people are going to shoot their spit wads at you because they can't handle it. And then Ray chimes in, I try to distance myself from prosperity preachers. Except for that time that he went on Joyce Meyer's television program. One of the biggest names in prosperity heresy around. So, this was, I don't know exactly what year this was held in. Obviously, it's a little bit old. It's about 15 years old, something like that. Ray Comfort didn't know who Joyce Meyer was at the time? Has Ray Comfort ever made a public statement that Joyce Meyer is a deceiver and warning everybody and telling them, I apologize for going on that program, I never should have done it? No, he never has. The closest he ever came to that was Justin Peters making a defense on his behalf, without naming the names of any of the people that he has done these interviews with. But he says he tries to stay away from the prosperity heretics, right? So what happened? At what point did Matt and Lori Crouch not fit that bill? Because in 2014, Ray Comfort seems to know what a prosperity heretic is. And yet he found himself side by side with Matt and Lori Crouch here in 2017. So in 2013, he knew what constituted a prosperity heretic.
Either personally...
But in 2017, he's with Matt and Lori Crouch. So in 4 years, did he get confused? There's no excuse. Been doing ministry for 30 some odd years. He knows what a prosperity heretic is. He knows what constitutes truth. He made a decision to go on TBN for greedy gain. That's what he did. To partner with Matt and Lori Crouch to sell his movie alongside Matt and Laurie Crouch in July of 2017. Never once has he repudiated this. Never once has he made a public statement saying, these are false teachers, I never should have done it. Not once. Justin Peters did a whitewashed version for him because they're both cowards and hypocrites. But here in 2014, he says he knows. He knows what a prosperity heretic is.
But this is what happens. When you stand up for truth, you're going to have people shooting their spit wads over at you because they can't stand that you stand for truth.
That's exactly what's going to happen with me, right? Right now, what we're standing for is truth. These things are verifiable. Whether you like me or not, you can't refute what's being presented. I'm not making claims, I'm showing you. Their spitwads, so to speak, will be hurled at me because they can't stand when somebody else stands for truth. It doesn't matter if it's me, it doesn't, or you, or whoever else. What he's saying is true in principle. But you will see how he will be, or their group will be the ones hurling the spitwads, because these things are irrefutable. This is them. These are their appearances. These are their words. That was Ray on Joyce Meyer's television program. It's Ray by Matt and Laurie Crouch. It's Ray on Kirk Cameron's television show. It's Kirk Cameron promoting Dallas Jenkins and The Chosen and T.D. Jakes and so forth. But they'll be mad that it was pointed out. Continuing. Of course, there's the conference Justin Peters was talking about. Ken Ham, H.B. Charles, Justin Peters, and this is the whole crux of it. This tag with his invitation is what prevents him from talking about these things. Because then his name will be removed from the Ark encounter. He simply won't bite the hand that feeds him. These men are governed by men, not by God. The Bible is a tool for self-advancement. Answers in Genesis. Discover why the Bible 2020. Who did we have here? Of course, Ray Comfort, E.Z. Zwane, Mark Spence, James White was there, Matt Slick, another one of Justin Peters' friends, Phil Johnson, right? Phil Johnson has been doing conferences with Ken Ham for a while. Answers in Genesis and Ken Ham. There you can see they're all pictured together. Phil, Ken, Matt, James White, Ray Comfort, Emil. You see how closely they're all connected? They cannot afford to call each other out. It's bad for business. As I said before, Living Waters and Answers in Genesis are very difficult to distinguish. Even the way the websites are styled, whether it's intentional or not, it's like even the coloring is similar. It sounds trivial, but it's not, right? So the blue coloring, they look similar is the point. There's some similar aesthetic about both of them. And no wonder they do all of these events together. You can see Ray Comfort all over Answers in Genesis and vice versa. Here's a shining example on their Twitter accounts. This is Living Waters, right? Ray Comfort. Here's his Twitter, their Twitter page. The Ark Encounter, which is Ken Ham. The Ark Encounter's hometown football team, the Cincinnati Bengals, is headed to the Super Bowl tomorrow. The Ark is lit up in the team's color, orange, to celebrate. Okay, next. Answers in Genesis. Congratulations to the Bengals for going to the Super Bowl. Super Bowl 56. And the same picture. So you can see they're sharing the exact same tweet of the Ark Encounter. Now, in addition to that, I will point out how vile and ridiculous the nature of these tweets are. The Super Bowl, we could talk about how trivial and worldly professional sporting is in general. I'm not saying sports in general or recreation is a sin or a problem. Professional sporting, however, is foolish. And the folly surrounding professional sports is evident to all. The Super Bowl itself in particular, to add another layer, is one of the most debauched television programs yearly in America, and I believe the most viewed program far and away every year. The Super Bowl is known for its halftime show, which is particularly debauched. And they're promoting it. They built a replica of Noah's Ark, and then they lit it up orange to celebrate the Super Bowl. Both Ken Ham and Ray Comfort, they said, here, the Ark is lit up in the team's color orange to celebrate. Can you imagine this? Can you imagine Noah himself celebrating what Sodom was doing? Some gaming event Sodom was doing? As he's preparing an ark to escape devastation and destruction, judgment on sin? Light up the ark in the color of the world, celebrating some worldly endeavor? The very world that God was destroying? This is so disgusting. If you're not disgusted by this, you've got a problem. If this doesn't bother you on the surface, you have calloused yourself and hardened your heart. It's right in front of you. These things don't have to be dug for. This is public. This is all over their Twitter pages. Both of them shared it at the same time. Coloring a replica of Noah's Ark orange to celebrate a Super Bowl, a football game, where all manner of drunkenness and revelry will be taking place. That's what they are commending you into the arms of. Brilliant. Justin Peters' defense of Ray Comfort again. Again, Ray Comfort has never repudiated this appearance. And here's Ray on Twitter 2020. You can either spend time during this quarantine or you can invest time. Don't miss out on this once-in-a-lifetime at-home conference with Kirk Cameron, Ray Comfort, J. Warner Wallace, and others. So, yet another conference with Kirk Cameron. But Ray Comfort shows no signs of slowing. He'll promote Tim Tebow. Why people hate Tim Tebow's faith but not Steph Curry's. And here's his defense of Tim Tebow, the ex-football player.
Why is Tim Tebow so hated? Because he's not ashamed to talk about sin and the cross.
It's the essence of our Christianity. It's the essence of our hope. For God so loved the world, he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him will not perish but have everlasting life.
Forgive me of my sins and make me a child of God. And from that instant, I know that I went from darkness to light.
That's what he did for me and what he did on the cross for all of us.
And he does so because he cares about the fate of the lost, as should every Christian. Do you remember?
Tim Tebow does so because he cares about the fate of the lost. And proof of that, all it takes for Ray Comfort to prove that is that you can quote John 3:16. Tim Tebow is not afraid to share the truth of the gospel because he cares about the lost. It's a whole video defending him, why people hate him. He commends him to you as a genuine believer on the basis that he's popular and can quote John 3:16, and arguably nothing beyond that. Here's Tim Tebow at the Vatican with his wife, taking pictures with Catholic priests, loving life with the Catholic priests, selfies with the Catholic priests, shaking hands with the Pope. John MacArthur teaches correctly that the Pope is an antichrist. That is absolutely true. This man is literally shaking hands with an antichrist, greeting him formally. According to 2 John, he is partaking in the deeds of an antichrist. Tim Tebow spoke at the 2016 Reset event as well. He was there backstage with Ravi Zacharias and so forth. Pope Francis gave the opening message at that ecumenical disaster. That's how long Tim Tebow's public waywardness has been freely available to the world. And before that, it's not just the Vatican. It's not just the Reset Conference. Here he is with Louis Giglio, the Pope Kisser, and Ravi Zacharias for a Passion 2020 promo. Yeah, that's right. He's a speaker at the Passion conferences. It's basically Hillsong reimagined. There he is.
I love it. I am so excited and honored.
Speaking alongside of some of the very people that Justin Peters named, Christine Caine and so on and so forth. This is the company of Tim Tebow. This man is a deceiver. He has been. Catholics, NAR types, Word of Faith, anything. He's not a Christian. He's a man who learned to recite John 3:16 and has a form of godliness denying the power. If Tim Tebow is a Christian, then everybody's a Christian. Then Louis Giglio is a Christian, Ravi Zacharias is a Christian, and, Pope Francis must be a Christian too. But of course, Ray Comfort points you into the arms of Tim Tebow. Why wouldn't he? Did a conference with him just last year. Last July, here's Ray Comfort and Tim Tebow. 2021, Be Bold for Jesus, October of 2021. There's Ray Comfort down here on the bottom left. Tim Tebow is the keynote speaker. Ray Comfort says it's an event you don't want to miss. He is literally doing conferences with a man who commends Catholics, Louis Giglio, and every heretic under the sun. That's Ray Comfort. From Kirk Cameron to Tim Tebow to Matt and Lori Crouch, this is Justin Peters' friend and partner. Listen.
And so when you turn on TBN, Daystar, and these other Christian networks, who do you see? You don't see John MacArthur. You don't see Steve Lawson. You don't see Mike Riccardi. You don't see...
No, when you turn on TBN, he says you don't see John MacArthur. Now we'll get into John MacArthur. Well, in the last year alone, you turn on TBN, you're bound to see John MacArthur at least twice. This was February 10th, 2022. John MacArthur on the Charlie Kirk show with Jack Hibbs. I did a whole video about Jack Hibbs and his problems. Him and John MacArthur teamed up for an event. It was called Freedom Sunday, I believe. And they had people like Che-On of the NAR, who I've detailed more in the Francis Chan video and a couple of videos on Michael Brown, if you want more information on that. In any event, Che-On was one of the false prophets who prophesied over Todd Bentley and so forth. He was at that event with John MacArthur and Jack Hibbs, partnering in ministry under the banner of Christ. You had men like Jerry Boykin, General Jerry Boykin, who is a member of the Knights of Malta with his friend Rick Joyner of, Morning Star Ministries. Rick Joyner, another NAR false prophet who was involved in the restoration of Todd Bentley with his heretic friend Bill Johnson. The list goes on. These are the men that they had with them at that event. So you can go watch that video, John MacArthur and Jack Hibbs partner with false teachers, something like that. But anyway, there's John MacArthur on TBN with Charlie Kirk, and this is not the only time. He's been on at least twice this year. It might have been the first time this year. But briefly, for those of you that don't know who Charlie Kirk is.
When we were thinking about who to have here tonight, he's just spectacular. Many of you have seen his movement, and it's a real movement. So during the lockdowns, there were people that decided to just kind of stay at home and do nothing. This church opened up and was courageous and bold. But this man started a movement. Now, I know you're going to get kind of confused when he comes up on stage, some of you that don't know him. He looks like a liberal. I give him a hard time all the time. He's got long hair. He looks like a 1960s hippie. But it's okay. We'll give him a hall pass. I'm totally kidding. But he went around the country and in these open air revivals that brought thousands of people to the Lord in the midst of the lockdown.
Notice what this is about and what he's saying. He brought thousands of people to the Lord. It's a movement. I mean, he can't stop singing the praises of this man. If you didn't know better, you'd think he was looking at John the Baptist or something. He brought thousands of people to the Lord, he says.
And I started to get these messages from people, and they said, Charlie, you got to look at the Sean Foyt guy. So I endorsed Sean back personally when he ran for Congress in California, and I was so moved by his story. And I started to see Sean attract crowds of thousands and then tens of thousands. And then I saw the opposition. I saw all of a sudden local governments try to lock him down. I saw the satanic response to what Sean was doing when everyone was supposed to stay at home. He was bringing people into the streets.
He says it's a satanic response. This is important. This is important, excuse me. The video I did called Prepare for Christian Persecution covers this point, that false teachers will incur some form of persecution as well, only not for righteousness' sake. There's a difference between general persecution and persecution for righteousness' sake. This is political persecution that has no bearing on sound theology or sound doctrine or the uplifting of the name of Jesus in spirit and in truth. There is a distinction. But because this guy names the name of Christ and receives some political opposition, he can therefore lay claim to being persecuted for Jesus' sake. That's not what's happening here. It's very deceptive. Mormons have done this for years. They have garnered credibility with people by pointing out their supposed opposition as though it were opposition for the sake of Christ and sound doctrine. That's not what this is. Even Rodney Howard Brown, notorious heretic, was arrested and went to jail for opposing some of these lockdowns. His opposition was political, had nothing to do with theology, nothing to do with Christ's sake as such. Please see that video on Christian persecution for more. Very, very deceptive.
To go glorify the Lord. And Sean, he'll do...
I keep listening to what this is framed as. It's about glorifying the Lord. Glorifying the Lord.
People into the streets to go glorify the Lord. And Sean, he'll do a better job than I will of actually talking about how this is not a political thing at all. It's about glorifying God. But guess what? Politics actually started to involve him.
I want you to pay attention to what he's saying, right? Because his entire shtick, and that's what this is based on politics and saving America in the name of conservatism by any means necessary, partnering with Catholics and whoever is conservative, right? This is the mind of a Herodian. That's what this man is. But he says, out of his mouth, it's not political. This is about glorifying God. So out of his own mouth, he's making this about God, even though it's really not. So even the excuse can't be used in his defense that he's just a political man. No, he's not just a political man. His own stated agenda is that this is for God, for the glory of God, not for politics. That's his stated agenda.
In his ministry, because you had secular politicians that say, hey, you can go protest in a BLM route. I'm the Dream City, man. And just God bless you for all the work you've been doing, seriously.
This church is amazing. You guys are incredible. We thank God for you all across America.
Okay. Singing the praises of Sean Feucht, loves the guy. He created a movement, etc., right? For those of you that don't know who Sean Feucht is a Bethel music worship leader. He is a member of the wildly heretical Bethel church out of Redding, California. He has been a singer and so-called worship leader for them for many years. That's who Sean Feucht is. He embraces some of the worst theology available today. And here he is talking with his pastor, so-called. Let's get about right here.
But we'll get it working. I want to hand it over to my pastor and a hero in the faith, Pastor Bill Johnson. He is here with us in Redding, California, and he is, what a privilege to have you. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Sean. It's an amazing honor to be alive right now. So many people lived during a time when there was no crisis. And
this is his pastor and hero in the faith, Bill Johnson. Most of you already know Bill Johnson is an outlandishly crazy man who preaches doctrines of demons. He is, infamously talked about gold dust falling in his church and seeing angel feathers just appear. True craziness, and is part of what is referred to as the New Apostolic Reformation. He is a disciple of C. Peter Wagner, one of the false prophets who prophesied over Todd Bentley. The list goes on and on. Many of you know who Bill Johnson is already, okay? Without belaboring the point, and I've covered this to a degree in the Michael Brown videos and the Francis Chan video, you can see more on Bill Johnson pretty much anywhere. That's what Sean Foyt is. This is his pastor. This is the organization he's associated with. Bethel is among the worst of the worst. That's what Bethel Church, so-called, is. That's Sean Foyt. That's what Charlie Kirk endorses as a movement that is glorifying God. Now, Justin Peters says this of Paula White: one of the most solemn duties of a pastor is to protect the sheep from wolves, something Justin Peters himself won't do unless the wolves aren't his friends. Robert Jeffries and Jack Graham just endorsed one of the most notorious ones. Paula White is both unqualified and disqualified from ministry on every conceivable level. This is absolutely inexcusable. I will remind you that Justin Peters has nothing to say about Jack Graham and John MacArthur being partners in ministry. Why? Because he's a staggering hypocrite. He's not wrong about what he says, wildly inconsistent in how he applies it. So Paula White is one of the worst, as he says. Well, let's take a look at Turning Point USA, which is the organization led by Charlie Kirk. Okay? I've got to reset this here. This is Charlie Kirk's own Facebook feed, okay? This is his Facebook page. Let me try to get the timestamp at the right point. I don't know why it's acting up here. But you can see this is Charlie Kirk was live June 11th, 2021, day 2 of Turning Point USA's Young Women's Leadership Summit. He invited these people. He endorses them. This is an organization that he leads. Listen to the intro.
Please welcome to the stage Brooke Rollins, Linda McMahon, and Pastor Paula White Kane.
Pastor Paula White Kane. They even call her Pastor Paula White Kane. So, of course, there's Paula White with all of these women doing their big interview. Charlie Kirk invited Paula White, as Justin Peters sees it, one of the worst available, to come and do a leadership summit for young women. This is the type of theological poison being exported by Charlie Kirk, the deceiver. In fact, a little bit later in this event, Charlie Kirk himself makes an appearance with Sarah Palin. So he was there. He endorses all of this. So it's not just Bethel music, it's also Paula White. Okay? I covered Charlie Kirk more in depth in the Eric Metaxas section of the Vodi Bakum video. You can see more on that. So it's not just Bethel music. It's not just Paula White. It's also the Catholic Church. Here he is giving an interview with a Catholic organization called Church Militant. Here's his sentiments on the Catholic Church.
Excellent. Anything else I should have asked you
great.
or you want to say?
Super blessed by this. Some of my greatest friends in the world are Catholics. I have so much respect for the Catholic tradition and church, and I go to Catholic Mass every once in a while. I don't take the Eucharist. Don't worry, you don't have to report me.
Well, Joe Biden's fine with it.
I say this, the world is a better place because of the Catholic Church. It really is, and that needs to be said more. And
any of your friends trying to convince you to become Catholic?
Oh, all the time. You know, the joke is that serious evangelicals become Catholics.
Yeah.
And I've actually seen that happen. So, well, I'm always open-minded because it's part of who I am. There's a great quote that says, "The wise man seeks to be corrected." So I'm always open-minded. Socrates said that.
Well, he couldn't find a Bible quote to save his life, so he reverted to Socrates. And if you're truly wise and you seek to be corrected, you can accept this correction. Everything you just said was hogwash, and it is a joke. The joke is that serious evangelicals become Catholics. This is demonic, and I'm not saying that lightly. This is not just a provocative term to alert your ears. You are listening to demonic ideology. He goes to Catholic Mass sometimes. The Catholic Mass itself is an act of blasphemy, where they believe they are re-crucifying Jesus every Mass. Because the atonement of the cross is not enough. Please watch the video, Catholic Church Masterpiece of Deception, for more on this topic. What you are hearing from Charlie Kirk is absolutely demonic. The world is a better place because of Catholics and the Catholic Church, he says. And hey, he's open to being corrected. Maybe he'll become Catholic one day. It's just another denomination for him, just like Dallas Jenkins. Catholic, Mormon, Christian. Maybe it's not my cup of tea per se, but, we're all in the same boat, basically. So it's not just Paula White. It's not just Bethel music. It's also Catholics, the Catholic Church. This man, Charlie Kirk, is making inroads into evangelical circles because he's a Trump supporter who talks a lot about politics. He's not a Christian. He is not a Christian. He is a political activist who uses the name of Jesus to further his own self-serving ends. And because he supports Trump, well, boy, he must be a Christian. He learned how to say some Christian stuff. That's good enough for most people. It was good enough for John MacArthur himself, who appeared with him on February 10th. This deceiving non-Christian man who promotes Bethel music, Paula White, and the Catholic Church is a host to John MacArthur, not just once, at least 3 times. Here's MacArthur on the Charlie Kirk show back in August of 2020. Now remember, Charlie Kirk himself says it's not about politics, it's not political. He does this in the name of God. He himself said it.
That the word will have free course. I'm so glad at this point in my life to be able to be preaching his word, and it accomplishes his purpose. I'm just thrilled to be alive in a time when the word can circle the globe and do the work of God. And thank you, Charlie, for what you do. I hope to meet you in person someday and say thank you for all your efforts.
Thank you, Pastor. God bless you, and we truly appreciate it.
Thank you, Charlie, for all of your efforts. I hope to meet you in person. The efforts of Charlie Kirk are exporting theological poison on par with, if not exceeding, the theological poison of TBN via Matt and Lori Crouch. Bethel Church, Paula White, and the Catholic Church, ladies and gentlemen. The joke for him is that serious evangelicals become Catholics. John MacArthur correctly teaches that the Pope and every priest in the Catholic Church is an antichrist. John MacArthur and I would agree that the Catholic Church does teach a false gospel. Charlie Kirk says serious evangelicals become Catholic, and he even goes to Catholic Mass. Here's MacArthur on TBN. The world's foremost exporter of theological poison. This was just about a month or two ago, July, I think, of 2022. For some reason, they won't show the date. But here he is with Charlie Kirk on Praise, typically hosted by Matt and Lori Crouch. Here he is with Charlie Kirk again.
GTY.org. That's Grace to You Radio. We're on the radio all across the world. GTY.org will access all the material that's available.
Well, thank you, Pastor, and I look forward to reading your upcoming book, War on Children. Again, you've been such an inspiration for me personally. I know for thousands of pastors across the country, and just thank you for taking these stands. And don't take it too personally when YouTube takes you off. I know you don't. It's happened plenty of times to all of us, and so we're with you, and thank you for proclaiming truth, and thank you for joining us today.
It's my joy, Charlie, and I'm glad to be in good company.
Thank you so much. God bless you.
It's my joy, Charlie, and I'm glad to be in good company, said John MacArthur to Charlie Kirk, promoter and endorser of Bethel, Paula White, and the Catholic Church. Listen to that again.
And don't take it too personally when YouTube takes you off. I know you don't. It's happened plenty of times to all of us, and so we're with you, and thank you for proclaiming truth, and thank you for joining us today.
It's my joy, Charlie, and I'm glad to be in good company.
Thank you so much. God bless you.
Glad to be in good company. At least the third time that John MacArthur has publicly partnered with this man under the banner and name of Christ, presupposing that they are both Christians, both endeavoring in the service and glorification of God. Charlie Kirk opens this program talking about his testimony and how he became a Christian and gave his life to the Lord when he was in 5th grade. John MacArthur heard all of it. He was there for the whole thing. You can go watch the full 25 minutes for yourself. He starts...
I needed to give my life to Christ. It just spoke to my heart. And every year as I have got older, my walk with Christ has strengthened and has meant more to me every single year.
Okay, this is a supposed and billed Christian program on TBN, which John MacArthur must know, if Justin Peters does, is the world's foremost exporter of theological poison, and a man who promotes some of the worst and most ridiculous theology available, from Paula White to Bethel Music to the Catholic Church itself. John MacArthur has appeared on this program at least twice this year, in 2022 alone. Once with Jack Hibbs, and then once just with Charlie Kirk himself.
And so when you turn on TBN, Daystar, and these other Christian networks, who do you see? You don't see John MacArthur.
Actually, you do see John MacArthur, Justin. You see John MacArthur saying he's glad to be in good company with a Paula White supporting, Catholic sympathizing, false teaching deceiver like Charlie Kirk. You do see John MacArthur. Will you ever hear Justin Peters say a word about this? Not on your life. Why? Because he's an idolater and a hypocrite. If Michael Brown had done that, was arm in arm with Charlie Kirk talking about how glad he was to be in good company with a man who believes the Catholic Church is another denomination, their brothers and sisters, in fact, serious evangelicals become Catholic, Justin Peters would be having a conniption. When John MacArthur does it, he's nowhere to be found.
TBN and Daystar and all these, they are the tip of the spear in exporting this theological poison to the rest of the world. And as Conrad said this morning, this is becoming the face of Christianity in most of the world. What are the good guys doing going and raising money for this? They are giving these men legitimacy, a sense of legitimacy that they do not have on their own.
Like John MacArthur giving Charlie Kirk legitimacy that he didn't have on his own? Or more legitimacy in a theological realm?
Paul Crouch, Matt Crouch, Paul's son, loves to have the quote-unquote good guys on there, gives them legitimacy. I'm sick of the good old boy network.
He's sick of the good old boy network, just not the good old boy network that he's a part of. And that's exactly what he's a part of. A good old boy network that won't critique John MacArthur for going on TBN and claiming the good company of a deceiver like Charlie Kirk. The good old boy network, that just started up by itself. The good old boy network that won't critique Ken Ham for doing a fundraiser on TBN with Matt Crouch. The good old boy network that won't say anything about Kirk Cameron and Ray Comfort also doing fundraisers on TBN. Won't say anything about Kirk Cameron being a partner with TBN, having his very own program on TBN, endorsing everything from Dallas Jenkins to Francis Chan to T.D. Jakes. Don't forget that. Right, we saw Candace and Kirk promoting T.D. Jakes. Justin Peters will never say a word about any of this because he is very much a part of the Good Old Boys network. Phil Johnson will never say a word about any of this because he too is a part of the Good Old Boys network. So his friend Ken Ham can go on TBN with Matt and Lori Crouch. He'll still sing his praises as long as he's getting an invite to a conference that's supposedly all about truth and combating lies. Out of their own mouths, they condemn themselves again and again. They are inexcusable participants in the evil deeds of darkness. Ray Comfort, Ken Ham, Kirk Cameron. The list goes on. These follies are patent and undeniable. These aren't accusations. This is proof. These are examples. They are undeniable examples. And if you continue to follow any of these ministries, you too will be deceived. If you show partiality, something I mentioned in the last video, the deception that came upon Ahab as a result of welcoming only encouraging words about himself, showing partiality rather than listening to truth. The deception that came to him was ultimately from the Lord himself, and it led to his demise. If you continue to sear your own conscience and defend this nonsense, these double standards, all of this partiality, well, it's not that you won't become deceived. It's not that you will become deceived. It's that you're already deceived in some form, and it will only get worse. You are learning how to implement double standards. You are learning how to be a hypocrite. You are setting a snare for your own soul. These men are to be marked and avoided. Kirk Cameron is a false teacher. Charlie Kirk is a false teacher. They are both partners of TBN, a satanic network if there ever was one. And so many of Justin Peters' friends and mentors make themselves party to it while he's denouncing David Jeremiah for doing the same or less. His friends are doing at least that much, helping raise money. John MacArthur helped promote TBN. He put his face on it twice this year and then proclaimed that he was in good company with a Catholic sympathizing, Paula White promoting, Bethel Church promoting deceiver like Charlie Kirk. Justin Peters won't say a word. Phil Johnson won't say a word. Well, you don't have to be like Justin Peters or Phil Johnson. Remove yourselves from them, lest you share in their sins and receive of their plagues. These things will only get worse. Again, I say, if it is not the great apostasy that we are witnessing, it is a great apostasy. It is the subtlety of deception. There is a combination of truth and error. That's how you pass off a powerful lie. Several truths couching a deadly lie. Keep yourself from it. Remove yourself from them. Unsubscribe from all of these channels. Stop giving them money. Stop giving them attention. Spare yourself and feel a burden eased and a conscience cleaned as a result. This is undeniable and inexcusable hypocrisy yet again. The rest of the video speaks for itself. Until next time, God bless and Godspeed.